single dad janitor got fired after finding a hidden drive. But what he did changed the CEO's fate. "Sir, you're not supposed to be in there." The voice was low, flat, and laced with suspicion. Caleb Reed froze, one gloved hand still holding the metal panel he had just unscrewed from the base of the mainframe cabinet. He turned his head slowly, shoulders stiff, beneath the faded blue of his janitor's uniform. The security guard, a young man named Tom who had only started 2 weeks ago, stood at the doorway with a flashlight and a raised brow. "I'm just clearing a spill," Caleb said calmly, nodding toward a red maintenance bucket nearby. "The system logs showed this unit overheated earlier. Thought I'd check the vent." "You're a janitor," Tom replied, unimpressed. "Since when do janitors check mainframe airflow?" There was a beat of silence. Caleb stood tall and unshaken. "Since I was asked to keep this place running smooth," he said, eyes steady. "And airflow matters." Tom hesitated. His hand dropped from the radio, clipped to his shoulder. "Just make it quick." Caleb nodded, once not breaking eye contact. As Tom walked away, he returned his gaze to the exposed panel. Hidden deep inside the machine was something that didn't belong. A slim, matte black SSD tucked beneath bundled network cables. It had no label, no barcode. Just a red dot sticker on one side, barely visible unless you knew where to look. And Caleb knew exactly where to look. He carefully removed the drive, slid it into a padded envelope from his supply cart, and covered the cavity with the panel once again. The whole operation had taken less than 90 seconds. To any outsider, Caleb Reed was just a quiet man with a mop. They didn't see the years behind his eyes, the missions, the ghosts. They didn't know that once he could dismantle a military drone faster than most people made coffee. Now he made coffee, and cleaned floors, and picked up broken things. It was 1:14 a.m. when he returned to the janitor's lounge, a narrow room with a flickering fluorescent light and a second-hand couch no one ever sat on. He sat anyway, pulled out his personal tablet, plugged the drive in through a secure adapter, and started parsing. Encrypted, of course, but whoever hid this didn't expect someone like him to find it. The folder was titled System Redundancy Testing, a boring name meant to deflect interest. Inside raw code, log files, access schematics. Then he stopped scrolling. There it was, Human Trace Override Protocol, Emergency Bypass, Logic, Internal Alpha. Caleb sat back slowly. No, this wasn't just diagnostic code. This was a live override key. With it, someone could hijack the company's core AI, human trace bypass, ethical restrictions, access user behavior in real time, and rewrite decision parameters without detection. The AI that CEO Claire Dawson had spent years defending as the most transparent and human-centric system in America could be turned into a surveillance weapon. And someone had just planted that weapon in her house. He glanced at the small drawing taped to the corner of his tablet, a child's crayon sketch of a woman with long hair standing beside a tall man and a little girl. "My papa and my mom. She's you." Ellie's words. His 6-year-old daughter who believed the world could still be safe if people just tried harder. She believed in Claire Dawson, drew pictures of her, called her the lady with the lonely eyes. He didn't know why. But now Caleb had a reason to look deeper. Later that morning, the sunlight had barely broken through Seattle's cloud line when he walked Ellie to her school bus. She skipped beside him, oversized backpack bouncing with every step. "Did she get my drawing?" Ellie asked as they neared the corner. "I left it on her desk myself," Caleb said, forcing a smile. "Did she smile, I think?" "She almost did." Ellie beamed. "Maybe she's sad a lot. Maybe she needs a happy friend." Caleb knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's why your drawings matter. Then I'll make her a new one today, with stars." He hugged her tightly, then watched the bus vanish around the corner. At 9:00 a.m., sharp Claire Dawson walked into the executive conference room on the 34th floor. Crisp black blazer, perfect posture, eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. She took her seat at the head of the table. Around her 10 department heads waited like sharks smelling blood. "Status report," she said without looking up. Grant, her chief of operations, cleared his throat. "All systems on track. Human trace public release scheduled for Friday. Security checks clear. No anomalies reported. Lies. Smooth, professional lies." Claire narrowed her eyes. She didn't trust easily and never completely. After what her father had done to this company, she couldn't afford sentiment. Still, something tugged at her. "Any facility breaches?" she asked. "Unusual activity." "Nothing out of protocol," Grant replied. But that wasn't true, because 2 hours later, when Claire returned to her office, there was a new drawing on her desk. Crayons on cardstock. A little girl holding a star standing beside a tall man, and her. The woman in the picture looked just like her. Same eyes, same expression. Except this woman was smiling. Claire stared at it longer than she meant to. There was no signature, just a scribbled caption in messy handwriting for the lady who forgot she's allowed to smile. And for a long, long moment, the room was quiet. "I don't have time for coloring books, Grant." Claire Dawson didn't look up from her screen as she slid the crayon drawing across her desk with 2 fingers. Her voice was clipped the way it always was when something scraped too close to the soft part of her. Grant chuckled. "Must be from the janitor's kid again." "What's her name?" "Ellie." Claire paused. "How would you know that I overheard? She comes by now and then, right cute, kid." Claire lifted her eyes. The room stilled. Grant's smile faded like a cloud blocking the sun. "Do me a favor," she said slowly. "Don't ever call her cute again. Not in that tone." He raised both hands. "Easy, just making conversation." Claire nodded once. "Exactly. Keep it that way." Grant turned, but before he reached the door, she added, "And close it behind you." As soon as the door clicked shut, Claire leaned back in her chair, her hand drifting once more to the drawing. 3 figures, 1 child, 1 man, 1 woman. Her. Only smiling. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. There was something disarming in its simplicity. Innocent. Unfiltered. Unbothered by how the world expected her to be. Her fingers hovered above the paper, then withdrew. She stood across the room and opened a drawer where she kept nothing except a framed photo of her late mother. Without hesitation, she slipped the crayon drawing in behind it like a secret only the 2 of them should share. Elsewhere in the building, Caleb stood quietly at the vending machine, waiting as it spat out a lukewarm bottle of water. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving the corridor that led to the executive offices. He was running on 3 hours of sleep, a half-eaten sandwich, and the weight of a secret he had no right to carry. The SSD was now hidden beneath the false bottom of his toolbox. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, forget he ever saw it. But Ellie's drawing her belief in Claire kept replaying in his mind like a song he couldn't unhear. He knew that look in his daughter's eyes, the one that says, "I see something in her." What scared him most was that he did too. That afternoon, Claire reviewed access logs again. Something wasn't right. A small discrepancy just a minute off showed unauthorized access to the mainframe bay during Caleb's shift. She called security. "Pull the footage from Monday night. Janitor corridor, I want eyes on it." Tom, the rookie guard, appeared 10 minutes later looking nervous. "There's a problem," he said, fidgeting. "The camera's been inactive for weeks. Maintenance flagged it, but nobody followed up." Claire's eyes narrowed. "So, you're telling me we have a blind spot outside the mainframe room?" "Yes, ma'am. And the only person scheduled in that zone? Caleb Reed." The name hit like a cold wind. She stared at the monitor, then at the security log again. She had two choices: call HR and terminate him officially, or confront him herself. She made her decision. Down in the service corridor, Caleb was replacing a ceiling tile when he heard footsteps behind him, heels sharp and fast. "Mr. Reed." He turned. Claire Dawson stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, eyes steel. "You accessed a restricted zone." "Why, I was assigned to clean that floor," he said evenly. "There was a system error logged in maintenance. I went to check. Maintenance doesn't check cooling systems." "I do." Claire took a step closer. "Let me be clear. You're either the janitor or something you're not supposed to be." "I clean the messes people pretend don't exist," Caleb said. "Doesn't matter what they're made of." A pause. "That's not an answer," she said. "It's the only one I've got for now." Claire's gaze didn't waver. "I don't like riddles, Mr. Reed." "Then maybe it's time you looked past the surface." She blinked. For a moment, something in her face cracked just a flicker. Then it was gone. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." Caleb nodded. No protest, no plea. Just a slow, quiet breath. "I figured," he said softly. He picked up his toolbox. Claire watched him go. But he didn't walk fast. He didn't slouch. He walked like a man who knew something she didn't. That night, Claire sat alone in her penthouse apartment. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The city lights blurred through the glass like watercolor. She poured herself a glass of red wine, took one sip, and pushed it away. Her phone buzzed. A new email from Internal Audit: unusual system activity logged during pre-launch environment testing. Possible breach. Requesting executive confirmation. Claire stared at the screen. Unusual activity. Possible breach. She suddenly felt cold. She thought of Caleb, his voice, his calm, his refusal to explain, and the way Ellie's drawing showed her not guarded, not defensive, just human. Meanwhile, in a tiny apartment on the edge of town, Ellie was fast asleep in her blanket fort. Caleb sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the SSD drive in front of him like a ticking bomb. He had enough to walk away, enough to stay safe, but the truth was louder now. This wasn't about protecting a system anymore. It was about protecting her. Claire. The woman with fire in her voice, ice in her eyes, and a silent war behind both. He reached for his old military dog tag still tucked in a drawer, ran a finger across the embossed letters. "Time to clean the floors people stopped looking at," he muttered. The rain was coming down in sheets, slicing across the parking lot like it had a personal vendetta. Claire Dawson stood beneath the awning of the executive tower, staring at her phone. She was 30 seconds away from stepping into her car when the call came in. Miss Dawson vehicle systems just failed. Brakes locked. The driver's side door sensor is glitching. Her driver's voice was tense, almost breathless. "Where are you?" she asked. "Garage level B3. "I was pulling around when it happened. We're lucky we weren't on the road." Claire exhaled, eyes narrowing. That made 2 unusual malfunctions in 48 hours. First, a janitor who moved like he was trained for more. Now, her car's onboard system, new state-of-the-art, failing without warning. And still, everyone kept telling her everything was fine. She turned around and headed back inside. 15 minutes later, Claire stood in front of the HR director's office. "Terminate him," she said flatly. "Which employee? Ms. Dawson, Caleb Reed. Janitorial staff. Effective immediately. Cause unauthorized access breach of protocol." The HR manager hesitated. "Ms. Dawson. His record is spotless, no violations, highly recommended by previous supervisors. Are you sure I don't fire people because of records?" Claire cut in. "I fire them when their silence speaks too loud." Caleb stood by the rear loading dock when the security guard handed him the envelope. "Immediate dismissal," the guard muttered. "I'm just the messenger." Caleb opened the letter, read it once, and folded it back without blinking. The guard looked uncomfortable. "You want to call someone. You've got what a daughter." Caleb's voice was calm. "Yeah, I've got a daughter. That's exactly why I won't." "Won't what?" "Beg." That evening, Claire was still at her desk when her office door creaked open. She looked up sharply, expecting Grant. But it was her assistant. "There's someone here," the young woman said nervously. "A child. With a drawing." Claire blinked. What? I think she's his daughter." Claire stood slowly, the name already forming in her mind. Ellie. Claire found her sitting in the main lobby, legs swinging off the leather chair, small hands clutching a folded piece of paper. Ellie looked up, eyes wide. "Hi." Claire approached slowly. "Does your dad know you're here?" "I took the bus to the stop near here," Ellie replied. "I wanted to give you this." She held out the drawing. It was different from the others. This one showed 3 figures again, but the man was walking away, his back turned. The woman was reaching out for him. The child stood between them, holding both hands like a bridge that didn't want to break. Claire stared at it. "I thought you should have it," Ellie said, quieter now. "Because you made my dad sad." Claire crouched down. "Ellie, sometimes grown-ups make choices to keep people safe, even if it doesn't look like that." Ellie tilted her head. "But he was safe. You were safe. Why did you break it?" Claire had no answer. So Ellie added softly, "You were in my picture, not because you're perfect, but because you're the one I wanted to stay." The words struck something so raw in Claire's chest she had to stand. She walked Ellie to the front desk, arranged a ride home, and stood watching as the little girl disappeared through the glass doors. That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment, still holding the drawing. It was wrinkled at the corners now, like it had been gripped too tightly by small, anxious fingers. "You were the one I wanted to stay." She poured a glass of water, walked to the window, and whispered into the city air. "What are you not telling me?" Caleb Reed. Meanwhile, Caleb stood in his daughter's room, tucking Ellie beneath her blanket fort. "You didn't have to do that," he said gently. "She didn't smile today," Ellie said. "So I drew her a sad one." Caleb knelt beside her. "There are things you can't fix with pictures, but there are things you can," she replied. He smiled, weary and soft. "You're too young to know how right you are." She looked up at him. "Is she a bad lady?" Caleb hesitated. "No." "Then why did she make you leave?" Caleb didn't answer. He kissed her forehead, stood, and walked back to the kitchen. His toolbox still sat on the counter unopened. He stared at it for a long time, then unlocked the false bottom and removed the SSD. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, Claire arrived at her building, entered the private elevator, and turned to face the polished metal wall. Taped to the center, neat, deliberate, was a note. Her name, handwritten. "Inside, you fired me because I didn't explain. But the truth doesn't need an elevator pitch. Look under Conference Room 5B. left vent. 8:43 p.m. footage is missing. Not everything that's clean leaves a shine. C. Her hands trembled as she reread it. She pressed the emergency stop. An hour later, Claire and Grant reviewed footage from the room in question. As predicted, 8:43 p.m. showed static. Audio gone, but motion sensors triggered activity in the room. Someone had been there. Someone with access. Someone covering tracks. Claire didn't say a word. Grant leaned back. Looks like your janitor's grasping at shadows. Still trying to clear his name. Claire turned to him. No, he's not clearing his name. Grant blinked. She stared at the screen. He's trying to save mine. The scream of twisting metal shattered the morning. A black SUV, Claire Dawson's, lay crumpled against the guardrail at the base of the off-ramp, its hood crushed inward windshield spider-webbed airbags deployed. The crash site looked like a freak accident, a steering failure, maybe brake loss. Except for one detail. Claire was not supposed to be driving that car, and the system failure from the night before, it hadn't been fixed. 15 minutes earlier, Claire gripped the wheel, the weight of Caleb's note burning in her mind. She'd planned to send the car for diagnostics, but her driver had called in sick and she was late for a legal briefing. Just a short drive, she thought. What could go wrong? Everything. 3 blocks from the turnpike, the dash lit up steering override error. Then, system locked. The car jolted. She slammed the brakes. Nothing. A single impossible thought flickered in her head. This isn't a malfunction. It's a message. The wheel spun itself left hard. Claire yanked against it with all her strength, but the car had already cut across lanes straight toward the guardrail. In those last seconds, time fractured. She thought of her father's betrayals, of Ellie's crayon drawings, of Caleb's silence that wasn't silence at all. And she whispered, I'm not ready to leave it like this. Then, impact. Darkness. Caleb was halfway to a job interview when the call came. Unlisted number. Static. Then a single, panicked voice. She was in the car. Claire Dawson. No pulse yet. She's trapped firefighters en route. He didn't ask who. He just ran. By the time he reached the scene, emergency vehicles were already there, lights spinning rain, falling the air thick with sirens and smoke. Caleb pushed past the barricades. A paramedic shouted, Sir, you can't be. But Caleb's eyes had already locked onto the twisted wreck. I know her, he said, voice calm but edged in steel. I can get her out. He didn't wait for permission. Inside the crushed cabin, smoke choked the air. Claire's head lolled to the side, a thin line of blood tracing her temple. Her hand still gripped the wheel. Caleb climbed through the broken passenger window, his uniform-soaked fingers working fast. Claire, he called. You have to wake up now. No response. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck. Faint pulse. Good. That means I'm not too late. The door was jammed. He braced his foot, yanked once, twice, metal screamed, but it gave. He lifted her gently, shielding her head, and carried her out just seconds before the hood caught fire. Hours later, Claire woke to the hum of machines and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. For a moment, she didn't remember. Then she saw him sitting in the corner, arms crossed, eyes red from exhaustion. Caleb. Her voice was raw. He stood slow. You tried to fire me. Twice. She blinked. And I still pulled you out of that wreck, he said. So I'm going to say something you're not used to hearing. Claire's lips parted, but no words came. You're not in control right now, Caleb said quietly. And that's okay. Silence. Then, why, she asked, voice cracking. Why didn't you just walk away?" He stared at her, something flickering behind his eyes. "Because my daughter believes in you," he said. "And the truth is, so do I." Claire swallowed hard. Caleb turned to go, but before he reached the door, she spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to be in that car today." He paused. "I know," he said. She looked at him, stunned. "You think someone I don't think," he said. "I know. That was a warning. And next time, they won't miss." Claire tried to sit up. Caleb walked back to the bed, leaned in close. "Someone inside your walls," he said. "Someone who knows the cameras that don't work, the systems no one double-checks. You built an empire to be clean, but someone's been dirtying it from the inside." Claire's hands trembled slightly. "And what do you plan to do?" Caleb straightened. "I plan to do what I've always done. Clean it." That evening, back at his apartment, Caleb opened his laptop and inserted the SSD again. Ellie peeked around the corner. "Is she okay?" "She will be," Caleb said. "Did she say thank you?" Caleb smiled faintly. She didn't have to. Ellie wandered closer, climbing into his lap. "Did you know you're like a janitor for people's hearts, too?" Caleb laughed quietly. "No bug." "I didn't." She rested her head against his chest. "Promise me she'll be okay." He looked down at the glowing code on the screen. "I promise. If I have to carry her through the fire again, I will." Meanwhile, at Clearline headquarters, Grant stood alone in Claire's office, staring at her empty chair. Then he opened his phone. A message blinked on screen. Phase 1 failed. We move to contingency. Eliminate loose ends. Grant typed back only one word. Understood. The knock came just past 7 a.m. Caleb was still in his faded gray t-shirt, flipping pancakes with one hand while Ellie colored on a cereal box with the other. He froze, mid-turn spatula in the air. 3 knocks. Not urgent, not desperate, just deliberate. He moved quietly to the door, peeked through the peephole, and nearly dropped the pan. Standing in the hallway, dressed in a long beige coat, wind-blown hair tucked behind her ears, was Claire Dawson. Not flanked by lawyers, not escorted by bodyguards. Just her. He opened the door slowly. "Morning," she said. "You know," Caleb said, folding his arms, "most people call before showing up at a janitor's apartment." "I'm not most people," Claire replied. "No," he said. "You're the woman who fired me, got herself nearly killed, and now smells faintly like lavender and engine oil." She raised a brow. "You always this charming before coffee. I'm always this suspicious before breakfast." There was a silence. Then, "Can I come in?" she asked. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, Claire took in the scene: clean floors, soft morning light, the faint scent of pancakes and fabric softener. Ellie looked up from her drawing, blinked, and then beamed. "You came." Claire softened. "Hi, Ellie. I made a new picture for you." Claire crouched beside her, gently taking the drawing. It showed 3 people again, but this time they were sitting at a table, smiling. The woman had a heart above her head. The man had a cape. Claire looked up at Caleb. "I get the heart. But a cape?" Ellie giggled. "He's a janitor. That's like a hero with a mop." Claire nodded solemnly. "That might be the most accurate job description I've ever heard." Caleb poured her a mug of coffee. "No sugar, right?" She tilted her head. "How do you know that?" "You don't build AI ethics for a billion-dollar company and drink sugary coffee," he said. "Too many moving parts." She took the mug and stared into it. I was wrong about you." He leaned against the counter. Which part? Claire looked up. All of it. There was a silence. "I didn't come here just to say thank you," she added. "I came because I need your help." He didn't answer. She pressed on. "Someone inside Clearline is trying to kill me. That's not paranoia anymore. That crash was orchestrated." Caleb nodded slowly. "I know. I need someone who can think like a soldier but move like a ghost. Someone who's already seen too much and still believes people can change." He looked at her. Hard. "Why me?" "Because you didn't walk away when you had every reason to." He held her gaze for a moment, then said softly, "You're not asking for help with code. No, you're asking me to risk everything for you." Claire's voice wavered just slightly. "Yes." Caleb set down the mug. "You're lucky I make terrible pancakes," he said, "because it means I've got time to kill." She blinked, then gave the tiniest smile. "I should warn you," he added, "this isn't going to end clean." "I don't want clean," Claire said. "I want truth." Later that afternoon, the two of them sat across from each other at a quiet cafe near the marina. Claire pulled out a small thumb drive. "This is a map of every access node tied to Human Trace's ethics engine," she said. "Only 5 people in the world know how to override it." "Let me guess," Caleb said. "Grant is one of them." Claire nodded. "And if he's trying to kill me, it's because I'm close to something." Or, Caleb added, "You're standing in the way of something." He slid the drive into his tablet. Lines of code lit up the screen. "What am I looking for?" he asked. Claire tapped a line. "There. That protocol shouldn't exist. It's a deep trace injector. Whoever runs this can insert behavioral bias into AI responses in real time. In other words, Caleb said they can change how the AI thinks, make it look ethical while making unethical calls. And if it goes live next week..." Claire trailed off. "It won't," Caleb said firmly. She looked at him as if seeing something in his eyes for the first time. "You believe that I believe people like Grant win. Only when good people do nothing." She let the words hang in the air, then whispered, "You know, I used to think strength was being the smartest person in the room." Caleb chuckled. "And now I think it's letting someone in even when every instinct says not to." He looked at her. Something softened between them. "Claire." She turned to face him fully. "If you're in this," he said, "we go all the way. No half measures, no hiding. I'm in," she said, steady and sure. Then added quietly, "And thank you for opening the door this morning." In more ways than one. That night, back in her apartment, Claire looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in years, she saw something unfamiliar. Not the CEO, not the survivor. Just a woman, human. Messy, terrified, and finally, hopeful. She touched the corner of her lips. There was the faintest curve. A smile. "Okay," Caleb said, hands on his hips. "So you're telling me your entire company runs on something called Human Trace. And 5 people can basically rewrite the ethics of a global AI in under an hour." Claire leaned against the window of his apartment, arms crossed. That's the terrifying part. It was never supposed to be that way. But somewhere along the line, control stopped being about safety and started being about profit. Caleb exhaled. And Grant learned early that if he couldn't outshine me, he could outmaneuver me. Her voice was calm, but beneath it was a tremor of something more fragile. He built his empire by hiding in mine. He watched her for a long beat, then nodded. "Then we stop hiding too." That weekend, they moved in silence. Claire worked from his modest dining table digitizing logs and restructuring firewall maps. Caleb cleared space in the living room, transforming it into a mission board, printouts cables, sticky notes, mapping connections between executives, vendors, surveillance logs. By Sunday night, Ellie had labeled it the Truth Wall with glittery stickers. Claire smiled at the name. That's dangerously accurate. She's 7, Caleb said, but I swear she's running on a wisdom engine no adult can match. On Monday morning, Claire entered the Clearline offices not as the pristine CEO in heels, but in worn jeans, no makeup, and a hoodie that belonged to her college days. Security barely looked twice. She moved through the building like a ghost, accessing overlooked network rooms and forgotten server cabinets. At one point, she paused in the janitor's closet, the same one where Caleb used to store his supplies. She ran her hand along the shelves. It smelled like soap, like metal, like memory. Suddenly, she noticed something taped behind a pipe, thin, folded paper. She pulled it free. It was a note in Caleb's handwriting. Everyone has their own kind of armor. Yours just happens to look like silence. She stood there for a long time. Then she tucked it into her pocket and kept moving. That night, back at Caleb's, Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, hair tied up, face soft with exhaustion. I spent years building a company to protect people from machines, she said. And I missed the people already inside. Caleb looked up from his screen. You mean your team? I mean myself, she replied. There was a pause. You ever feel like the person you've become is just scaffolding, she asked. Like the real you is still trapped under all of it. Caleb walked over, knelt in front of her, and gently tapped the side of her head. You know what scaffolding is for, what to help something grow taller than it ever could on its own. Claire blinked, the emotion catching in her throat. You say these things like you've lived 5 lives, Caleb smiled faintly. Sometimes it feels like I have. She looked down. You ever miss who you were before the war? No, he said. But I miss who I thought I'd be after. Claire stared at him, and, for the first time, reached forward and placed her hand over his. No words, just warmth, and the quiet miracle of 2 broken people finally stopping long enough to feel whole. The next morning, Claire left early. Caleb was still asleep on the couch, Ellie curled up like a cat beside him. On the kitchen counter, Claire left a blueprint she had sketched by hand. A system map. A proposed security patch. A backdoor, legal, ethical, invisible. At the bottom, she had written, if this works, human trace will be incorruptible. If it doesn't, thank you for reminding me how to believe again. That afternoon, Caleb stood outside Clearline headquarters waiting. Claire stepped out the revolving doors like someone reborn, blazer-crisp hair pulled back, presence undeniable. She held up a small thumb drive. It's ready. He took it. You sure? No, she said honestly. But I trust you. He smiled. Then that makes 2 of us. She looked up at him, eyes steady. You know this changes everything. I'm counting on it. Back at his apartment, Caleb booted up the encryption server, inserted the drive, and watched as the code loaded. Ellie peered over his shoulder. Is this the part where we save the world? Caleb smiled. No bug. This is the part where we fix it. And somewhere inside the code, a new seed was planted. A system designed not to be perfect, but to learn from the imperfect. From janitors, from daughters, from women who learned to lead without losing their heart. Grant tapped the end of his pen on the desk, each click more deliberate than the last. In front of him, 2 screens. One showed the projected launch sequence for Human Trace. The other, internal server access logs from the past 72 hours. His jaw tightened. There it was. Unauthorized entry. Patch injection. User ID obsolete, but recognized. Claire Dawson. He leaned back slowly, the leather of his chair creaking under the strain of held-in fury. She had moved, and not just moved outplayed him. "Read," he muttered under his breath like it was a curse. Then he picked up his phone and dialed. "Activate Protocol Duskfall. I want surveillance on both of them. Physical and digital." A pause. No mistakes this time. If Claire wants to play hero, let's remind her how villains win. Claire was in the kitchen when the call came. Caleb had just returned from a supply run with Ellie, who now sat at the table building something elaborate with toothpicks and marshmallows. Claire answered the unknown number on speaker. "Claire Dawson," she said. Silence. Then a voice cold and venomous. "You've been busy." She didn't flinch. "Hello, Grant. I always knew you had a soft spot for charity cases, but this one." A janitor. Caleb arched a brow from across the room. Claire's voice stayed even. "He saved my life. Twice. That's more than you've done in 10 years. Grant laughed. "You don't think I'll let you push this patch live, do you? You're standing in the path of a billion-dollar pipeline. I'll cut through you before I let you close the valve." Claire didn't respond immediately. Then, with calm precision, "You won't stop this." Because for the first time, the people behind the code are watching the people behind the curtain. "You think the world wants a clean system?" Grant hissed. "They want results, and they want someone else to take the fall if it breaks." Claire leaned closer to the mic. "I used to think like that. Then I met someone who taught me something important. Not everything that's clean leaves a shine." Click. Call ended. "You didn't have to say that," Caleb said, walking over. Claire turned to face him. "I did. Now he knows we're ahead. I want him to know, because that's when men like him make mistakes." There was a silence. Then Ellie piped up from the table marshmallow tower, swaying slightly. "Are you guys fighting bad guys again?" Caleb grinned. "Something like that." Ellie held up her sculpture. "This is you and Claire, and the marshmallow on top." "Who's that?" "That's me," she said proudly. "I'm the lookout." Claire knelt beside her, touched her hair gently. "You're more than that, kiddo. You're the reason we're doing all this." Ellie tilted her head. "Why?" Caleb answered, his voice low, steady. "Because someday you'll walk into a world we helped fix." Later that night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Claire joined him, pulling his old hoodie tighter around her frame. "I used to come out here to forget the noise," he said. "Now I come out here hoping it'll tell me something." Claire leaned beside him. "You still have nightmares?" He nodded. "Not about the war. Not anymore. Now they're about being invisible, doing the right thing. And no one remembering you did." She was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I remember." He looked at her, something raw in his gaze. "You don't have to carry this with me, Claire." She stepped closer. "I'm not carrying it with you. I'm carrying it for you, just like you've done for me. And just like that two wounded lives leaned into each other not out of weakness but out of recognition, out of choice." The next morning, everything moved fast. Claire and Caleb entered the Clearline Data Hub at 6:17 a.m., timed perfectly with the rotating security shift. By 6:29, Claire had re-verified her biometric override with the internal patch team. By 6:42, Caleb rerouted the external data feeds to temporarily mimic routine maintenance, At 6:51, the system paused. Claire inserted the drive, and at 6:53 a.m., a new version of Human Trace was born, one that couldn't be manipulated, one with immutable transparency, one written in the language of conscience. The screen blinked once then, green-lit integrity lock enabled. Ethics engine sealed. Claire exhaled slowly, a quiet triumph in her chest. "We did it," she whispered. Caleb nodded, eyes never leaving the screen. "No, you did it." She turned to him. "You keep saying that," she said softly. "But the truth is, you've been the code beneath everything good I've done since the day we met." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said the words she didn't know she'd needed so badly. "You're not just the woman who saved a company. You're the one who made it worth saving." But 10 blocks away, Grant stood in a boardroom watching the security feed of Claire walking out of the server room triumphant. He crushed the coffee mug in his hand. "Prepare the legal strike," he said coldly. "Dig up everything on her. I don't care how old. She wants war. Let's give her a scandal." His assistant hesitated. "But what if it backfires?" Grant's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll make sure it backfires on him." The photo hit the news at 9:07 a.m. A grainy image, years old, ripped from military archives never meant for public eyes. Caleb Reed, honorably discharged, court-martialed, allegations insubordination, excessive force, civilian trauma. The headline read, "The janitor behind Clearline's ethical firewall was once a soldier who broke the code." Claire stared at her phone in disbelief. The article was everywhere, Clearline's internal newswire tech blogs, even morning TV segments. Beside her, Caleb stood still, silent, his face unreadable. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. But something inside him went dark. At the Clearline lobby, the silence was louder than the whispers. As Claire walked through, executives avoided eye contact. Assistants murmured. PR reps paced nervously. But the worst part. The boardroom was already full. They hadn't invited her. She walked in anyway. Grant was standing, hands folded behind his back tone, smooth as polished steel. "We value integrity," he was saying, "and with recent revelations we must reconsider the direction of our leadership. Our systems are under scrutiny. And while Ms. Dawson's contributions are undeniable, so is her judgment, particularly in bringing in an individual with a complicated past into our security network." Claire stood at the doorway. Every eye turned. She took a breath, then walked straight to the front of the room. "If you're going to quote headlines, at least be brave enough to do it while I'm in the room," she said. A beat of silence. Grant gave a tight smile. "I was just explaining our situation to the board." "No," Claire said. "You were twisting facts." "Again." She turned to the board. Yes, Caleb Reed was court-martialed. And, yes, he was cleared. What the report doesn't say, what Grant conveniently left out, is why. She pulled a file from her bag, tossed it onto the table. Declassified last year. The mission was compromised by faulty intel. Caleb disobeyed orders to evacuate a civilian school before an airstrike. He didn't break the code. He rewrote it with his own life. The board members flipped through the report, eyes, narrowing expressions, shifting. Grant stepped forward, voice rising. "That's not the point. Perception is everything." The media. Claire's voice cut clean through. "Perception didn't pull me out of a burning car." Dead silence. Claire continued, steady, her voice tight but unshaken. "I brought Caleb into Clearline not because I pitied him, but because he's the only person I trust with the future we're building. When my car was sabotaged, he saved me. When our system was corrupted, he fixed it. When no one else told me the truth, he did." She looked around the room. "You want to fire someone today? Fire me." A pause. Then she added softly but clearly, "But I'm warning you. Do that, and you lose the soul of this company." Outside, Caleb waited. Alone. He'd seen it all on the lobby monitors, heard most of it from the hallway. He was ready to leave, had even started walking. But then a hand reached out, grabbed his. Claire, in front of everyone. She didn't speak. She just stood beside him, holding his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. A flashbulb popped from a reporter's phone. The image would be everywhere within the hour. But Claire didn't let go. Neither did he. Later that night, they sat on the rooftop of her building. The city sprawled around them, glittering distant. Caleb stared out at the lights. "I didn't want you to have to defend me." Claire looked at him. "I didn't do it for you." He raised a brow. "I did it because I'm tired of men like Grant deciding what counts as clean, what counts as good. You didn't fit their narrative, so they tried to erase yours." She reached for his hand again, fingers curling around his. "From now on, you don't hide who you are. Not with me, not with them." He was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "And who am I, Claire?" She turned to him, eyes steady. "You're the man who made me believe again. The man who cleans without fanfare, who sees broken things and still chooses to repair them." A faint smile played on his lips. "I thought I was just the janitor." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You are," she whispered, "and somehow that makes you the strongest man in every room." The next morning, the board voted. Claire stayed. The patch stayed. Caleb. He was quietly offered a new role, unofficial but undeniable strategic culture liaison. Title didn't matter to him, but the door plaque did. It read, "Some heroes don't wear badges. Some just carry mops." And far away, in a quiet apartment somewhere in the city, Grant watched the news feed on mute. He picked up a tumbler of bourbon, stared at the photo now circulating online, Claire Dawson and Caleb Reed hand in hand. He downed the drink in one swallow, and dialed a number. "They're not backing down," he said. "So we moved to phase 3. A pause. His voice dropped an octave. "Now we take away what he can't replace." The moment Caleb stepped into the apartment, something felt wrong. The lights were on, but too still. The faint hum of the old refrigerator was the only sound. Ellie's shoes were by the door, exactly where she always kicked them off. But her backpack. Gone. "Ellie," he called out, setting down the grocery bag slowly. No answer. Then he noticed the note on the table. Typed, anonymous. "Come alone. No police, no mistakes. The daughter of a janitor is just as disposable as his past." His hands clenched the paper until it trembled. He didn't shout, didn't panic. He simply grabbed his coat, turned off the lights, and left like a man who had no intention of losing anything ever again. Claire was in the middle of a press prep when her phone rang. No ID. She answered immediately. "Caleb." His voice was low, controlled, too controlled. "They have Ellie." Where I need you to stay at Clearline. Don't follow me, don't be ridiculous, I'm serious. You're not going in alone. I don't have a choice." Claire was already reaching for her keys. "Then neither do I." "Claire." His voice softened. "If something happens, don't. Listen to me. No. You don't get to protect me from this. You don't get to carry this one alone." There was silence. Then he whispered, "I always thought my past would catch up with me. I just didn't think it'd knock on her door." Claire's voice cracked but stayed strong. Then let's be the ones who open it. They met outside a shuttered train depot on the outskirts of the city. Rusted rails, broken windows. One flickering light above the entrance buzzing like a dying insect. Caleb was already there, hands empty, shoulders tense. Claire pulled up, slid out of her car without a word. He turned. "You shouldn't be here." She stood her ground. "And yet, here I am." Grant's not bluffing this time. He's aiming for where it hurts. "Then he made his first real mistake," she said coldly. "Because he just threatened the only thing you'd burn the world to protect." Caleb looked at her, then really looked. Not just at her face, but at what stood behind it. Steel. Heart. Fire. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Claire replied. "But I'm more afraid of losing what we've finally found." Inside the depot was a mausoleum of forgotten machinery and echoes. Somewhere down the dark corridor, a girl's voice called, faintly, "Daddy." Caleb broke into a run. Claire followed close behind. They found Ellie in a side room, unharmed but scared, sitting on a worn bench with duct tape loosely around her wrists. As soon as she saw them, she bolted into Caleb's arms. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. He held her tighter than he ever had in his life. Always. But just as he turned, a figure stepped from the shadows. Grant, flanked by two silent men in suits. Touching Grant, said dryly, "Truly." Claire moved in front of Caleb and Ellie. "This is where it ends, Grant." "No, darling," he said with a smirk. "This is where it begins. Your little stunt with the patch. We found the back door you didn't close. The press doesn't know yet, but when they do, your golden janitor becomes the fool who opened the gate for a security leak." Caleb stepped forward. "You're bluffing." Grant smiled wider. "Am I?" Then he pulled out a tablet, pressed a button, and the depot lights flickered. A projection lit the far wall mock screenshots of corrupted data logs, user credentials, falsified documents, all pinned to Caleb's ID. Claire didn't even blink. "Those are fakes," she said. "They don't have to be real," Grant replied. "They just have to look real. Long enough for you to be buried, for the board to replace you, for me to walk back in." Then he turned to Caleb. "And you'll disappear the way men like you always do. A tragic footnote in someone else's legacy." But before he could gloat further, Caleb spoke. "I've disappeared before he said quietly. I spent years scrubbing floors while you stole air from people smarter and better than you. You built an empire on fear. But the thing about fear..." He stepped closer. "It doesn't last." Grant raised a brow. "Is that so?" Then Caleb pulled something from his jacket. A flash drive. Tossed it to Claire. She caught it without looking. Caleb said, "It's not just a firewall. It's a record. Every move Grant's made, every contract he buried, every name he sold, every transaction scrubbed from Clearline servers. We found it. And this time, the truth's backed up." Grant paled. Claire tapped the drive against her palm. "Insurance policy," she said. "Digitally time-stamped, mirrored to 3 locations. The moment I go silent, it goes live." Grant's facade cracked for the first time. "You don't have proof," he hissed. Caleb stepped beside Claire Ellie, still wrapped in his arms. "You don't need proof when you finally stop being afraid to speak." They walked out together. No police, no showdown, just the weight of Grant's empire beginning to crumble under its own rot. Back in the car, Ellie sat between them, holding both their hands. Caleb looked at Claire. "Why did you follow me in there?" he asked. She turned to him, voice soft. Because somewhere along the line you stopped being someone I worked with and started being someone I couldn't lose." He didn't speak, just pulled the car over and kissed her deep quiet full of everything he couldn't say. Ellie giggled from the back seat. "You." They laughed, but neither let go. Not of hands, not of each other, not of hope. 6 weeks later, Caleb stood in front of a glass door with no sign, no badge reader, and no guard. Just a phrase etched into the frosted panel. "Innovation is built on trust." He exhaled and pushed it open. Inside, a room unlike any other at Clearline. No cubicles, no suits, no screens dominating walls. Just wide tables, clean boards, natural light streaming through tall windows, and people, engineers, interns, former janitors, even a retired ethics professor working together. At one table, Claire sat cross-legged on a stool reviewing a flowchart drawn in colored markers. Across from her, Ellie was explaining the system to 2 developers twice her age. Caleb smiled. It wasn't just a team. It was a community. And it wasn't called the Ethics Committee. That sounded like punishment. They called it the Human Trace Hub. Claire looked up and saw him, and that smile, the one that still caught him off guard, bloomed across her face. "You're late," she said, teasing. "I brought breakfast," Caleb replied, holding up 2 bags, "and a protein bar Ellie snuck into my pocket." Ellie grinned. Backup plan. Adults always forget to eat when they're excited. Claire laughed, then handed Caleb a set of sticky notes. New features we're testing. Read-only audit trails. Real-time bias alerts. Transparent decision trees. Caleb blinked. In English, she leaned in. "Basically, it means AI that doesn't lie and can't be bribed." "Good," he said, "because the world's got enough people doing that already." The room buzzed around them with quiet energy. No shouting, no power plays, just people trying to build something better. Ellie tugged on Caleb's sleeve. "Can I show you something?" He followed her to the far corner of the room where a small glass case stood on a pedestal. Inside it, just one item, a mop handle sawed short and polished mounted on velvet. Beneath it, a plaque, "The First Firewall." Caleb stared at it. "I thought we were joking when we said that," he murmured. "We weren't," Ellie said. "You stopped a man with that. You stopped a machine with that." He was quiet. Then said, "I didn't stop anything. I just refused to move." Ellie looked up at him, eyes wise beyond her years. Sometimes that's exactly what saves everything. Later that afternoon, the team gathered for a round table. Claire stood at the front. No title, no pitch deck, just a story she began. A story about a janitor who saw patterns the rest of us ignored. A little girl who asked questions even AI couldn't answer. And a man who thought he'd lost his place in the world until we built one around him. She gestured toward Caleb, who sat at the edge of the circle. "People always ask me how we rebuilt Clearline after everything fell apart. The answer's simple. We stopped building with code alone. We started building with character." There was a long pause, then a quiet clap, then another, until the entire room stood in a slow rising ovation, not for a presentation, not for an idea, for a man, and the values he'd carried like armor through every quiet hallway and sleepless night. That night, Claire, Caleb, and Ellie sat on the floor of the living room surrounded by takeout containers, laughing at something ridiculous Ellie said about AI writing bad country songs. Caleb leaned back on his hands, watching them both. "You ever think he said that none of this was supposed to happen?" Claire tilted her head. "Like fate. Like, maybe I was never meant to walk into that office, never meant to be seen." Claire turned serious. "You weren't just seen, Caleb. You were chosen. He looked at her. By who? By me. By Ellie. And by every person in that room today who realized the strongest thing you ever did was stay. He nodded slowly, then said, I used to think cleaning meant fixing what people ruined. Now I think it means seeing what's worth saving. Claire's eyes glistened, and Ellie, curled up on the couch, whispered, Daddy, yeah. Can I tell people what you really do now? He chuckled. Sure, kiddo. What do I do? You fix hearts. Somewhere far away, a former executive drafted an apology post he'd never publish. Somewhere else, a senator quoted human trace as a model for responsible innovation. And in thousands of quiet homes, users began noticing something different. Their AI wasn't just faster, it was fairer. It asked questions. It explained itself. It didn't just predict. It listened. Back at Clearline, they added one more inscription to the glass door. This room has no uniforms. Only people brave enough to clean up the world. A year later, they stood together beneath the soft glow of studio lights. The Time magazine cover behind them was already iconic. They didn't disrupt tech. They redeemed it. Claire in a crisp navy dress, Caleb in a tailored blazer mop pin proudly on his lapel, Ellie beaming her hair braided like she always asked Claire to do on special days. The Human Trace platform had launched in 17 countries. Not just a new AI, a new standard. Clearline had gone from scandal to symbol, from firestorm to foundation. But none of that was what stayed with people. It was the image of 3 people, an engineer, a janitor, a little girl changing the course of an entire industry by choosing integrity over fear. Back home, the cameras off the applause behind them, they returned to what mattered most. Dinner. Caleb stirred sauce at the stove while Ellie drew rockets on a napkin. Claire set the table with mismatched plates because matching had never mattered to them anyway. As Caleb brought the pot over, Ellie looked up and said, This smells like Tuesday. Claire raised an eyebrow. Tuesday. Yeah, like the night you stayed for dinner the first time. Remember? Claire smiled. I do. Caleb chuckled. That was the night I almost burned the lasagna. You did burn it, Claire said. But you both still ate it, Caleb pointed out. That's because Ellie declared burned food tastes better when people laugh about it. They sat down, 3 chairs, 1 table. Not perfect, but whole. As they ate, Caleb reached into his pocket and slid something small across the table to Claire. It was a folded napkin, handwritten in his neat, careful script. Thank you for not seeing just what I clean, but why I care to clean it. Claire's eyes shimmered. She reached across and squeezed his hand. Thank you for reminding me what leadership really looks like. Caleb looked at Ellie, who was pretending not to listen but grinned anyway. Then he said, voice soft, I used to think legacy was about what you leave behind. He paused. But maybe it's about who you stay with. After dinner, they went for a walk. It was nothing grand, just the 3 of them down a quiet neighborhood street under amber streetlights with Ellie skipping ahead, counting constellations out loud. Claire tucked her arm into Caleb's. I think the world changed because you refused to. Caleb gave a half smile. I didn't change the world. You did. He looked at her. No, we did. They stopped by a bench, sat while Ellie climbed onto a nearby sculpture and pretended it was a moon rover. Claire rested her head on his shoulder. I've been asked 100 times how Human Trace became so successful, she said. They all expect a secret algorithm or a disruptive theory. And what do you tell them? She smiled. I tell them the truth. We didn't write code to win. We wrote it to protect what matters. Back at the house, Ellie curled up on the couch, dozing off. Caleb carried her gently to her room. As he laid her down, she stirred. "Daddy?" she mumbled. I like her." He smiled. "Me too." Ellie opened one eye. "She's gonna stay right." Caleb brushed hair from her forehead. "She already has." Outside, Claire was on the porch, arms crossed against the soft night chill. He joined her, slipping his jacket over her shoulders. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't have to. They looked out at the quiet street, the sky full of stars. Caleb spoke first. "You know, for a long time I thought I had to keep my head down. Not 'cause trouble, just clean up after everyone else." Claire turned to him. "And now," he exhaled, "now I know sometimes the person who cleans up is the one who knows what needs to be rebuilt." She looked into his eyes, and in a voice steadier than it had ever been, she asked Caleb, "Could I ask you something crazy?" "Of course." She took his hand. "Could you be my home?" He didn't answer with words. He kissed her slowly, tenderly, as if sealing a promise, not with a ring, but with presence. And when they pulled apart, she whispered, "Welcome home." The next morning, a plaque was hung outside the Human Trace hub. It didn't list titles or degrees, just 3 names: Claire Dawson, Caleb Reed, Ellie Reed, and beneath it, etched in brushed steel, "Some codes protect systems. Ours protects hearts." Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest strength. Sometimes a janitor doesn't just clean a building. He restores a broken world, one small act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's see how far kindness can travel. And if you believe in stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of what really matters, hit that subscribe button and join our storytelling family. There are many more beautiful stories waiting for you here. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the strongest code is the one written with love.